Picking up pretty much where we left off in the last video, where we were reflecting on the fulfillment of John 13:38 with the Keystone Pattern Foundation. So moving on from that, we're going to focus on these other sections before we get down to this really big one that we're going to be talking about in another video, Lord willing. So here in this section, I've highlighted verse 18 and verse 25. Now the servants and officers had made a charcoal fire because it was cold, and they were standing and warming themselves. Peter also was with them, standing and warming himself. It matches verse 25. Now Simon Peter was standing and warming himself. And as you're reading through this, and you're typically not going to be aware that there's this regression of themes, you would come down there. Now Simon Peter was standing and warming himself, and you might think, well, so just some useless detail. But when you understand about the structure, and you understand the purposes, this makes sense, because we've got a clear match here. And this is positional from one perspective. And a lot of this, as I mentioned in the last video, is positional. There's a juxtaposition of position or location and time. So we see now the servants and officers had made a charcoal fire because it was cold. Peter also was with them. Who? The servants and officers, right? And here's what they're doing, and they were standing and warming themselves, standing and warming himself. So there's a parallelism here. And so we see a very similar theme here. And we've seen the matching in a very clear correspondence from one section to the next. Now, as we go inward some more, we're already in the D element, A, B, C, D. Now we go to the E and E prime. Verse 19 matches to 24. The high priest then questioned Jesus about his disciples and his teaching. It matches. Annas then sent him bound to Caiaphas the high priest. Now, when I was analyzing this, it was very obvious that this more closely matched several other sections if you divide up the passage in other ways. But at the end of each one of those, it was like going down a road to see what came of it. And I had to kind of close down that road and go back, because although it matched other sections to a certain degree, when you went a little bit further and discovered more about the context, it became less and less compelling with each of those matchups. So how do we know that this is actually a legitimate pairing? Well, after you've analyzed the rest, you see it can be no other way. When you see it in detail and you've gone all the way in a granular fashion, it is what it is. So the high priest, well, that's Annas, that's Caiaphas. So, and what's Annas sending him bound to Caiaphas for? To be questioned about his disciples and his teaching. So there is a distinct match. When you're analyzing structure, you find yourself, unless the Lord has pointed you to something very explicitly, there's a lot of misdirection that seems to be in play. It's very difficult to discern what's actually being aligned. I mentioned in this section how that the last part of the scene of the arrest, where Peter pulls out his sword and cuts off the ear of Malchus, how that matches up to a surprising context instead of the rest of the scene of the arrest. And so we see these things that are counter to our casual thinking about how things are organized. And it really makes it a curiosity that draws attention. And, you know, if there was a narrative in the Bible that deserves a lot of attention, it's certainly this one, because it's not only historical and what happened with Yeshua, who went before us to show us the way. It's for us. Continued part of our preparation. So now as we go to this next collection, we have verse 20 matching up to verse 23. And how so? Well, one is repeated in the other in the same order. It's another parallelism. Very obviously, Jesus answered him matches up to Jesus answered him. And then here's what Jesus says in the B and B prime parts. And while the A and A prime are just simple phrases, the next parts are expanded. So in verse 20, we have these three lines repeated in the next three. How so? It's a chiasm. They're repeated in reverse order. I have spoken openly. I have said nothing in secret. If that's not obvious, well, get some coffee, shake it out. It's about as obvious as it gets, really. Speaking openly is not speaking in secret. To the world matches where all Jews come together. I have always taught in synagogues and in the temple. And in the companion section down in verse 23, I've broken it out into a 4-line collection, and what we have is a parallelism instead of a chiasm. If what I said is wrong, but if what I said is right, bear witness about the wrong. Why do you strike me? And this is an interesting para. And you might think as you're maybe looking at the rest of this, that this should actually match up with something else. But again, we know it matches up because we've analyzed the context. And what can we learn about this? Well, bearing witness about the wrong, this is what the striking is a sign of. It bears witness about the wrong, but it's not about what Jesus said. And the judgment is being made here. So now as we continue to go towards the center of this chiasm that is spanning the entire unit of John 18:10 through 19:16a, we come to line 21a matching to 22b. Why do you ask me? One of the officers standing by struck Jesus with his hand, saying, is that how you answer the high priest? Oh, now we have a striking. And why isn't this striking matched up with this striking? Well, from one perspective, it is and should be, but from the perspective that we're looking at where we've analyzed in a very granular fashion what's going on, it clearly matches up like this. And again, it is a bearing witness. So one of the officers standing by struck Jesus with his hand, saying, is that how you answer? Why do you ask? Is that how you answer? Why do you ask me? Is that how you answer the high priest? And this officer is there because basically he's supporting the high priest. So is there a legitimate connection between these two companions? Yes. Is it completely obvious? No, not really completely obvious, but yet it's legitimate. Now, this intersection is also interesting. We have a single line in verse 22, when he had said these things. What things? Well, specifically this. And the first two lines here are repeated in the second two. How so? It's a parallelism. They're repeated in order. Ask those who have heard me. They know what I said to them, what I said. So really, all these matchings are legitimate. And as you explore this, you may find more insights that I haven't talked about. When we get down into this other section, it's big. There's a lot going on here, a lot to talk about, and we're going to reserve that for another time, Lord willing. So I encourage you to explore according to your interest as the Lord may lead. There's a lot of inspiration there. Certainly, it's always impressive to see how the Lord has organized the language. It's incredibly detailed and profound in its design. And I always find it inspiring. People, when they come to the Bible, certainly they're not aware of this immediately unless the Lord impresses it upon them. And from one perspective, one might look at this and think, why is the world not converted from this witness? Would this not speak to them of a creator? Well, certainly. But all of creation is a witness to the creator. And from the book of Romans, you can see that that's not really compelling enough to impress people. You may recall in your own life how you were an enemy of God. I certainly was. And why did we not find creation compelling as a witness to the creator? Well, we were numbed, and it's just a supernatural thing. And so the hiding of even this magnificent design of the Holy Scriptures, it's a witness to us of the blindness of the world supernaturally, the spiritual blindness that's over people, even Christians. And why don't people find studies like this compelling? You know, you look at the stats on our YouTube channel and you think, well, why aren't people watching these videos? Why are they not compelled by this message of the reset? Don't they think we might know something possibly that they don't? Well, one would think there would be a reason for the Lord to conceal these things from people. And he has his reasons indeed. This is very privileged. It's only intended for a small number. The Lord is going to do a work like with Gideon, with a small number of people. And it's enough. The Lord, when he gathered his disciples around him, ultimately it came down to the number 12 and even 3. So he traveled with a larger company. He often spoke to multitudes. And the multitudes will come. But this is not yet about the numbers. The Lord has a sequence of the unfolding of his plan. And he's in no hurry. He's very patient. This is going to work out for maximum salvation